Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, and the foes out there. Welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind all the avid podcast listeners that you can find this episode and all 3 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, do not be cheeky. Do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. Today's guest is someone who should have been on this show some time ago, but I believe the timing is right now. He is a prominent, renowned pro-Palestine activist, a commentator on Muslim issues in the UK, but most importantly, for this episode and for this general election, he is running as the Workers' Party candidate in Birmingham Yardley, and that's none other than brother Jody Mcintyre. Jody, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
The honour is all mine, and I'm so sorry to have brought you on so late, but I think the timing is perfect. What do you think?
Of course, it's all worked out for the best.
You've gone from Gaza convoys to being dragged off your wheelchair by police, and now you are standing for political office. Why now? And has the Gaza genocide been that serious for you to make the decision that you have?
Of course, undoubtedly. We're witnessing a genocide in real time. Now, you get some people who say, what has Gaza got to do with the UK? What has Gaza got to do with the elections here? I find this sentiment very odd, very strange, because for me, to witness suffering and feel pain and despair at that suffering is one of the most natural human instincts one can have. And I think this sentiment often belies a xenophobic attitude in reality, or a racist attitude, to be honest.
How so?
In the sense that if a genocide was taking place closer to home, in Europe, perhaps people wouldn't question what it had to do with an election in the UK. What I mean by that is that if Russia was carrying out a genocide in a European country and someone's MP was a stated, declared friend of Russia, and people decided not to vote for them on that basis, I don't think that would be controversial. And ironically, often it is the case that the people who question what Gaza has to do with UK politics are the ones most vehement in their support for Israel. They're the ones who have Israeli flags on their Twitter profiles. They're the ones defending the Israeli state as it drops bombs on families in refugee as it drops bombs on families in tents at every opportunity. They have the cheek to question what Gaza has to do with UK politics. I would ask the question in return: why do we have so many members of parliament who are friends of Israel? Whether that's Labour friends of Israel or Conservative friends of Israel. So the real question is, what is the relationship between Britain and the Israeli state? It's not a question of why do people feel pain when they see children being blown to pieces. It's not a difficult question.
But surely we would punish the Tories for that. Why Labour?
Labour, no one will forget the interview that Keir Starmer gave.
LBC.
Well, he said that Israel had the right to cut off water and power to Gaza. I've lived in Gaza, and when I was living there were regular power cuts. Sometimes there was only power for a few hours per day. So I know what that means in real terms. And to me, it's absolutely abhorrent that anyone would wish that fate on a civilian population anywhere in the world. Now, local Labour MPs can try as hard as they want to erase that interview, but it will always stay in our minds. It was such a callous statement to make. I was shocked. I didn't have much faith in the Labour Party before that interview, but I was genuinely shocked. Now, to bring this back to Birmingham Yardley.
You're running against Jess Phillips.
I'm running against Jess Phillips.
Someone who is listed as a supporter of Labour Friends of Israel, someone who is denied being a member but has been referred to as a member by The Guardian.
This is semantics. Whether you're a parliamentary supporter, which I believe is the correct term,
yep,
or a member, which perhaps is used more widely, whether it's the accurate term or not, at the end of the day, Jess Phillips is trying to play both sides. She's trying to curry the support of the Muslim community in her constituency by claiming that she's a supporter of the Palestinian people, whilst at the same time remaining in Labour Friends of Israel. Now, my problem with this is that Jess Phillips has woken up every day and seen the same images that we've seen, witnessed the same horrific scenes that we've witnessed, and there wasn't a single day that she woke up and said, I should resign from this organisation or lobby group or whatever you want to describe it as. Furthermore, I want to make a broader point than that. Most people in this country vote on the basis of a party. That's just a fact. It doesn't matter how popular or unpopular you are locally. Most people vote on the basis of a party. Now let's forget politics. If I was working for any organisation, for any company, or was representing any party whose leader green-lighted crimes against humanity, whose leader gave his tacit approval for acts of genocide, for war crimes, for massacres, I would resign from that party or company with immediate effect.
What would you then counter to those who would say it is better to be in than out?
Great question. Great question. I had a phone call 2 days ago from a supporter of Jess Phillips in Small Heath. Actually, he might be one of the last Labour supporters left in Small Heath. And he said to me, quote, that Jess Phillips hates Keir Starmer's guts. I said, if she hates Keir Starmer so much, why is she campaigning for him to rule our country, to lead our country? This is the definition of hypocrisy. Why would you go out and campaign for someone to be Prime Minister who you hate? Not even dislike, hate, he said. And again, he brought up the point that you just mentioned. He said she's remaining in Labour to have influence, to influence policy. Did she influence Labour's policy when children in Gaza were being blown to pieces?
No.
The Labour Party, I don't know when this interview is going to be broadcast.
Next week. Today is Wednesday the 5th of June. It's coming out next week.
On Wednesday the 5th of June, the Labour Party up to today still support continued arms sales to the Israeli state. Has she influenced that policy? Resigning from the cabinet, resigning from the shadow cabinet with a view to returning in the future is not good enough.
What do you want, resignations?
Do you think if I went to the people in Gaza and said there's a politician in the UK who claims to be supporting you, who claims to be on your side, but is a member of or a parliamentary supporter of Labour Friends of Israel, do you think they'd make that distinction?
No, you have blood on your hands.
This is the point I'm trying to make. You're campaigning for Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer, I would say, is one of the most dangerous and authoritarian political leaders I've ever seen in this country.
Let's look at the constituency in which you're running. Labour isn't the only issue. This was traditionally, or at least in the past, it was a Lib Dem seat.
Yeah.
Right? And from my understanding, the Lib Dems could be allocating some resources in this constituency. So you've got a couple of issues here. You've got the Labour, the party of genocide, enabling, and you've got Lib Dems who still see this as a seat that they can regain. What's your thoughts on that?
To be honest, in recent years, the Lib Dem vote has been quite derisory in Birmingham Yardley. They have put out some leaflets recently trying to use recent council results to suggest that they have some sort of chance. But I think the reality is that Birmingham Yardley is a two-horse race between me and Labour. And even though they're not admitting this publicly, the signs are there. Today, Labour brought up Sadiq Khan, who famously said that his commitment to Israel couldn't be challenged. They brought Sadiq Khan to Birmingham, specifically to the constituencies of Ladywood, where Ahmed Yaqub is standing, against Shaban and Mahmoud, who failed to vote for a ceasefire. Can you imagine? Who couldn't vote for a ceasefire? These are the types of politicians we're talking about. And they brought him to Birmingham Yardley, where we have our Labour Friend of Israel, as the local MP. Look, as an MP, your job is to represent your constituents. This is not a Muslim, non-Muslim issue. The overwhelming, this is not a Muslim, non-Muslim issue. Most people in Birmingham Yardley, most people in the country, oppose genocide. It's a ridiculous statement to even have to make. But the reason we have to make it is because we have so many politicians who are beholden to the interests of a foreign state. And that's a real foreign interference scandal, if you like.
Brothers and sisters and friends, I see that you're enjoying the content. How come you've not clicked subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel? And if you're watching via Rumble, how come you've not subscribed on our Rumble channel? If you like the content, you like the guests, you like what we're talking about, it's absolutely inexcusable and cheeky for you not to click subscribe. Thank you and Jazakallah khair. Look, I appreciate, and there's much truth in it, that the issue of the occupation of Palestine generally and the ongoing genocide that we've seen for the last 8 months isn't just a Muslim issue. In fact, you'd see perhaps the majority of those that have been taken to the streets every weekend in London have been non-Muslims, right? Some of the most outspoken defenders of the Palestinian cause in recent months have been non-Muslims. But we've seen the Muslim vote organise around this issue, whereby they have said Gaza is not the only issue, it's the main issue. In your constituency, you have a significant number of Muslim voters. If I'm correct, is it more than 30,000?
Yeah.
And percentage-wise, how much is that?
It's about 37%.
You've been endorsed by the Muslim vote. So the Muslim bloc vote is something to be reckoned with if done correctly. How much are you banking on that?
Listen, it's Labour that's banked on the Muslim vote for far, far, far too long. No one has the God-given right to the votes of any community. All we can do is speak up for communities who are underrepresented. You know, as you mentioned, it's not just the issue of Gaza. There's a widespread feeling that Labour have completely abandoned and completely failed Birmingham. We have 1 in 3 children living in poverty in Birmingham. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. We have amongst the highest deprivation rates in the country. We have crime spiralling out of control. We have whole communities that have been completely neglected and left by the council. The Birmingham Council is a Labour-run council, and they are now bankrupt. They mismanaged their funds to such an extent that they're now bankrupt. They're saying they can only perhaps collect the rubbish every other week from now on. This is supposed to be a first world country. Birmingham Council are having to shut down libraries and not collect the rubbish every week. This is what we're dealing with here. Now, the argument often goes that all of these ills, all of society's problems, are the fault of the Conservative Party. And of course, when Labour are in power, the argument goes that all of society's problems are Labour's fault. The thing is, people are tired of this blame game. It's Labour's fault, it's Conservatives' fault. People are tired of this type of politics. At the end of the day, if you're the local MP, you have a responsibility to hold central government to account, to hold local councils to account, and our MP in Birmingham Yardley hasn't done that sufficiently. There are so many challenges that need to be tackled, and I think people are saying now, instead of voting for the lesser of two evils, why don't we vote for good?
And leave the evil.
Exactly.
Now look, there's a number of issues that you've rightly mentioned that are relevant and very apparent in Birmingham. You're running in Yardley, and one of the issues that came to media attention was your party leader's comments on same-sex relationships and same-sex LGBT education being taught to children. I know that Jess Phillips has her own views on this particular matter. You know, I remember the old exchanges that she had with Shaquille during the whole RSC protests in Birmingham. What's your personal view and take on this matter in terms of an issue which could be of concern to your constituents?
The issue that is of concern to his constituents is mainly centred around the types of things that are taught to children at primary school. My personal belief is that any type of education to do with sexual relationships, any type of sexual relationships for under 10s, for example, I think that's inappropriate. Again, I think this is a widely shared view amongst Muslims, amongst non-Muslims. I know that Jess Phillips has a different view that she's been regularly and openly candid about, and that's fine. Everyone can have their own view. But again, my point is, as the local MP, my job would be to represent the constituents. And I think a lot of people feel that it's inappropriate for the schools to be teaching very young children about sexual relationships in general.
Let's talk a bit more about, the days and the weeks to the build-up of your announcement, the weeks that have followed. Oh, it's not been that much time, actually.
No.
But how it's been, Wednesday the 5th of June here, your candidacy announcement has been around for about over just 10 to 14 days, I'd say, around about that much, since the election was announced.
Well, I announced my candidacy a few months.
3 months before, yeah. So how's it been? Because for the first time, we have a candidate, and forgive my frankness and candidness, disabled, revert. There's a lot of different and unique things about you.
Yeah.
It's not your conventional candidate.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
How's the feedback been in Yardley?
There's a lot of people who see me as a cause for hope, you could say, as something to be excited about, something that says there is a way to effect change and to engage with our political system in a positive way. I actually met with a constituent today whose son has severe learning difficulties, has non-verbal autism, epilepsy, other issues as well. And she's a strong advocate for him and an amazing campaigner on behalf of carers and parents of disabled children. And she told me that before Jess Phillips was elected, she went to meet a group of carers of disabled children and told them that she would make their cause a top priority. And this lady said that after Jess Phillips was elected, they never heard from her again. And she didn't deal with those issues it wasn't the top priority, put it that way. These are the types of people that I want to represent. The people who are always last on the list, the people who are always ignored. And the reason we're ignored, say for example, I'm talking about disabled people in particular, for example, the reason we're always ignored is because we're not represented. Disabled people make up almost a quarter of the population of a country.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Well, you wouldn't know that because you never see us in public. You never see us in public life.
1 in 4?
I think it's about 24%.
Wow.
Between 21 to 24%.
SubhanAllah, I didn't know this.
Guess what percentage they are of MPs?
Zero.
Less than 1%. Less than 1%. This isn't right. We need more disabled representation in Parliament. We need to have a voice. We need to be seen. And your reaction is very interesting because the reason people don't know this is because you don't see. I remember I used to get the bus to school when I was a teenager. I never saw other disabled people, hardly ever. So I think this is a big issue. Another point I could bring into it is that when I announced that I was standing for MP, I think it was the second video I put out, and I got thousands of, or at least hundreds of abusive comments.
Yep.
Not based on my beliefs, not based on my principles, but based on my appearance or the fact I have a disability.
Yep.
Now, I see this, whether these people know it or not, I see this as a very effective way of, or they think it's an effective way, of dissuading disabled people from putting their heads above the parapet. Because, I think for most people, the amount of abuse you get just for having just for having a disability makes it not worth it. However, without trying to play the hero here, I'm happy, I'm more than happy to take all of this abuse if it means that disabled people in the future will have more of a chance of getting into public office and getting into public life. But it's a serious issue. It's a damning indictment of our society. What I always think, what is going through these people's minds? You know, anyone could have a child with a disability. Imagine you've been online abusing, so oh, you're this, you're that, because they have a disability.
And you
next thing you know,
you have a disabled child.
You have a disabled child, or you have a car crash. You have to use a wheelchair for the rest of your life. I honestly, I feel sorry for these people, because it's just incredible to me that you would spend your time online abusing a disabled person.
Did it help with the campaign funds?
Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does, to be honest, because obviously there's other people out there who, you know, feel empathy towards you and want to support you. But I've always said I've never played the victim. I've never seen myself as a victim. Just because I'm highlighting abuse doesn't mean that it bothers me. It's just something important to highlight. And another point I'd make, I remember a couple of months ago, Jess Phillips wrote a post online about some of the abuse she receives because she's a woman. And she posted a disgusting email she received. I left a comment. I said, these types of people are disgusting, abusing women, sending them rude, horrible things, and you shot someone could even write about a woman or about anyone. Now my question is, why has Jess Phillips never called out the abuse that I received? She can't pretend she hasn't seen it. I'm her competitor in this electoral race. I've got posts I've made with thousands and thousands of abusive comments. Why has she never come out and said that no candidate should be abused online or in public just because they have a disability? So I think it's a double standard. If you're against abuse of minorities, condemn it across the board, not only for yourself.
Perceptively, at least on social media, you have been very closely associated with and aligned with Ahmed Yaqub and Shakil Afsar. Both are running independent. You're running Workers' Party, but the trio seem to be working in synergy. Is this the case?
I mean, they have their campaigns. I have my campaign, but
you've endorsed each other.
We've endorsed each other and we support each other in any way we can. I hope they both win.
Do you think they have a chance of winning?
I think we've all got a great chance. I think Labour...
Are you in it to win it?
Of course, 100%. Labour know that they've lost a lot of support, but they don't realise how deep the disillusionment is. Let me give you one example. If you scrapped the two-child benefit cap today, you would take hundreds of thousands of children straight out of poverty in this country. Keir Starmer has confirmed that he will not do that because, in his words, he doesn't have the money. He said, I don't want to promise something that I can't deliver later on. At the same time, he's pledged to keep up funding for nuclear weapons. Now, there are Labour voters across my constituency, and across the country, Muslims, non-Muslims, all backgrounds, who have voted for Labour for decades, who are saying to me on the doorstep, because of Keir Starmer, I'll never vote for Labour again. The man is toxic. The man is hated because of his policies, because of his inhumane policies. How can any Labour MP defend this? Jess Phillips is most well known for her work with victims of domestic violence and victims of rape, and for standing up for women's rights. Look at how the Labour Party have treated Faiza Shaheen, a new mother who has been campaigning for Labour on the doorsteps for months, who was summarily told you're not our candidate anymore because you liked to tweet X number of years ago and because you retweeted a post X number of years ago. Look at how they treated Diane Abbott, who no apology was enough for them in her case. No apology was enough. So why is Jess Phillips not speaking out for these women? Is it a case that some women matter more than others? That I'll speak out in some cases but not others? The Labour Party has become a toxic party. They're not for Muslims. They're not for women. They're not for black people. They're not for disabled people. Who are they for? You know, Keir Starmer is moving further and further to the right, chasing the votes of people on the right, and he's completely abandoned Labour's support, Labour's traditional voters, and they're going to pay for this at the ballot box. You know, we can't reward politicians for inhumane policies. We can't. There has to be a consequence. There has to be a consequence in votes. You supported the genocide of Gaza.
Are you of the same opinion of your party leader who famously quoted after his by-election victory that Sunak and Starmer are two cheeks of the same backside?
What's the difference between Labour and the Conservatives now? Like, in terms of policies, I even saw a report about I didn't watch it, but the leaders' debate between Starmer and Sunak, and they're saying that, you know, in policy there isn't much between them. So in that case, if you don't agree with Sunak and you don't agree with Starmer, you'll be searching for an alternative now.
Is Workers' Party that alternative?
Well, I think for hundreds of thousands of people, it will be. I think for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, it will be. And I know for a fact that in Birmingham Yardley, people want something different. They don't want Labour. They don't want the Conservatives. They don't want any party who was silent, I can't even say was silent, was supportive of the Israeli state's decimation of Gaza over the last 8 months, which still continues today. And they can't even call for a pause in weapons sales. This isn't a radical proposal. We're saying stop selling weapons to a country that's killing babies, that's killing men and women, civilians. They can't even call for that, and we're going to reward them with our vote. It can't happen. It can't happen.
Hold up. The show will continue, but before it does, I want to remind you all that the Blood Brothers podcast is the fastest growing English language Muslim podcast in the world. When we deliver unique quality content to you week after week, brothers and sisters and friends, it requires money. So please click the link in the description and support this project however you can. Back to the show. I have two questions to wrap up this podcast. First one is this. Whether it's the Workers' Party, the Muslim vote, or independent candidates, there have been situations up and down this country in some constituencies where there has been a split vote, or there will end up being a split vote. Now, I know George has made a commitment in standing down candidates, case in point being Ilford North and Lian Mohammed, in endorsing Ahmed. So there are examples where the Workers' Party have stood down candidates, or they've not put someone there, right, for the greater, wider objective. But there's other towns and cities and constituencies where everyone's kind of contributed towards this situation whereby we have multiple pro-Palestine candidates running on the Gaza ticket and no one seems to be standing down. I mean, we had most prominently the Taslima Kanji and Ajul Masroor case, which alhamdulillah got resolved. But we've got repetitions of this happening in many parts of the country. What's your personal view on this situation whereby Muslim voters, pro-Palestine voters, voters of justice and conscience want to vote for someone who's not red or blue, but then on the ballot paper, they've got a Workers' Party candidate, an independent candidate, a Muslim vote endorsed candidate? What's your thoughts?
It's crazy to me. It's crazy because Labour and the Conservatives and even the Liberal Democrats have millions of pounds behind them, have corporate backers behind them, have party machines behind them. So I would urge everyone to be realistic. Please be realistic, because I feel like there's a kind of delusion that is set in some people's minds. To be any candidate from the establishment parties will be a huge uphill task in any area. But it's only a possibility if we're united behind one candidate. So I would just urge people, I would urge people of justice and people who share a lot of the views we share to unite and rally behind whoever's the best candidate in each constituency, whoever has the best chance of winning, because it's the only chance we have. But also I think sometimes there are other factors at play. We know that Labour will be playing a lot of dirty games.
They'll be putting plants forward.
The Conservatives will be playing dirty games. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to lose these seats. They really don't want to lose these seats. And to me, it's almost a victory in itself that this is even a possibility. The fact that we've made this dent in the establishment, the fact that we've entered the conversation, the fact that so many Labour MPs who are friends of Israel, Labour friends of Israel, are now talking about Gaza and the suffering in Gaza and crying crocodile tears and reversing their position and making U-turn after U-turn on not just on Palestine but on so many issues is a sign that our voice is getting out there, our position is getting out there, and they realise that this election is not going to be the plain sailing they thought it was going to be.
Now look, we've conversed a fair amount and a lot of it has been around the Gaza genocide. Granted, we've spoken about the representation of disabled people, housing, poverty. We've touched upon many things which I'm sure are very relevant to your constituents, especially in light of the fact that you're absolutely correct. for the sixth largest economy in the world, in the second biggest city in this country, you have a local authority that essentially has no money in the bank. What would your final words be to those constituents in Birmingham Yardley that aren't pro-Palestine or are indifferent to Gaza, or that's not, as the Muslim vote have said, it's not the main issue, it's not the only issue, but it's the main issue? What do you say to those constituents who it's not even an issue, or it's not there on my priorities list? Why should those who don't necessarily have strong views about Gaza or Palestine vote for you on July the 4th?
I would say to those constituents that I'm here to represent everyone. That's the job of an MP, to represent everyone. However, we've tried the politics of the past. We've had the Labour MP for almost 10 years now. And what has it done for our community?
Very little to nothing.
Well, we've got a housing crisis. The Labour Council, their waiting list for social housing has ballooned to over 23,000. People can't find somewhere safe and adequate to live. There's no facilities for young people who are turning to nitrous oxide balloons and getting into car accidents and taking people's lives. We have a healthcare issue where you can't get an appointment at a GP. I remember taking my son to A&E and sitting in A&E with my 4-year-old son overnight, all night, just to see a doctor. This is not just about Palestine. There are so many issues where the Conservatives and Labour have completely failed communities because they genuinely don't care. They don't care. This is a reality. Everyone knows it. When do you see your MP on your street? I'll tell you, in election time.
Election time.
At election time, everyone knows that. So I would say whatever your political background is, my job, if I'm elected, would be to represent you. And that's exactly what I plan to do. From my background, growing up as a disability, I know what it's like not to have a voice. I know what it's like to be totally let down and ignored by the authorities. And anyone who feels like that, anyone who feels like they don't have a voice and they're not represented and they're not spoken to or spoken for, those are the people I want to represent.
Jody, it was an absolute pleasure having you on, and I wish you all the best for July the 4th, inshallah. Brothers and sisters and friends, I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed this podcast as much as I did. If you like this episode, do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. And of course, for all the avid podcast listeners, you can find this episode on all 3 seasons on all the major audio platforms. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.